calling this workshop meeting to order at 5 p.m. Thank you all for coming out for our City of Lynn Haven Commission workshop on the possible code change for the Al-Bibi property. At this time, we will have remarks from our city manager and then open the floor to our planning director, and we'll begin our discussion amongst the commission, and then we'll have comments from the public.
Thank you, Mayor. One of the things that we did say that we would come back and have another workshop. I know the commissioners really wanted to make sure that they understood everything that was in this ordinance before moving forward. This ordinance is in, this workshop here today is in place so that we have enough time to advertise it, and it would be on our next commission meeting date for vote. And so I'm going to ask Amanda if you will come up and go over all the things that we've gone over in these past couple of weeks. And then, you know, Amanda will turn it back over to our mayor for any questions or comments from the commission or the public.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. What I'm going to do first is just go through the presentation that I showed you when we had the first reading of the ordinance. So this is ordinance number 1127, which is a small-scale future land use map amendment application. The owners are Riyad and Rashda Al-Bibi, as are the applicants. The agent is Sean McNeil from McNeil Carroll Engineering. There are two parcel numbers involved, 08922-060-000 and 08925-010-000. The parcel is located on Sally May Drive. The parcel size is 15.52 acres. Well, this being, well, as we get onto in a moment, some of this is going to be changed. If you approve. Existing future land use map category is industrial. The requested future land use category is low density residential. The adjacent future land use map designations are to the north, industrial. To the south is low density residential. To the east is low density residential. And to the west is industrial and conservation. This aerial map shows you the two parcels that are involved, and this shows you the current future land use map designation. As you can see, it has that black stripe to it. All of these parcels here that you see with the black stripe are also industrial parcels. The parcels that you see around it here to the east and to the south are low density residential. This is what the applicant is asking for. So the applicant is asking to make this parcel consistent with the low density residential parcels that are surrounding it on these two sides. These green areas here are conservation areas. So these areas would not be included in the land use map amendment because you cannot change the land use on conservation. So they will remain conservation. This shows you the property that we're talking about. Here. So you can see, if you recall, there were two parcels. So this is one of the parcels. This area here is the second parcel. The green area, as I've already said, is not going to be included. So in the legal description in the ordinance, you have the legal description for the whole of the area minus the legal description for this conservation area 1 and this conservation area 2. So again, those are not going to be part of this future land use map application. The areas that you see with this kind of dotted or little black crosses on, all of these areas are wetlands. So they have been identified because they are areas that will not be constructed upon if the land use change is allowed and they're able to get to development order stage. So the change is for these areas that are not wetlands. We also have a 30-foot setback from wetlands, so they would not be able to do anything, to develop anything on those wetland areas. This I'm showing you because it is part of the public record. Somebody had requested this. We don't usually look at any particular project when there's a land use map application, because anything that is allowed within that land use could be constructed there. Now, as they're asking for low density residential, they can only construct single family homes if you grant it up to 4.99 units per acre. And in a moment, I'm going to go through what is currently allowed under industrial. I'm showing you this because, as I say, it's part of the record. They did submit it with their land use map application, and this is showing the project that they would like to construct on here, that they would apply for a development order for, were they granted the low density residential land use. So they would be putting some single family homes on here. Currently, this is the section out of the Unified Land Development Code which shows us what uses are permissible. Along the top here we have low density residential, medium density residential, high density residential, mixed use commercial, etc. And then down the side it tells you, it has like a list of uses, and if there's a P in the box it means it's allowable, it's permissible. If there's an S it means that it's permissible with supplemental standards, and if there's nothing in there it means it is not an allowable use. I have gone through this and I have pulled out all of those uses that are allowed in industrial. See this column here? In industrial, and there's 2 pages, so there's also uses that are on this page that are allowed. I've pulled them out and I've listed them on this presentation, and so I'm just going to go through them for you. So they are asking for low density residential, single family homes up to 4.99 units per acre. What is currently allowable under the industrial land use are multi-family dwelling units, including duplexes, at 20 dwelling units per acre, colleges, schools, daycares, nursery schools, vocational trade schools, music, dancing and dramatic arts schools, essential utilities, government services, public works yards, emergency services, public libraries, public parks, financial institutions, medical and dental offices, outpatient clinics, auto repair, stadiums, auditoriums, sports areas, auto washing, automotive parts and mechanical garages, commercial entertainment establishments including theatres, ballrooms, bowling alleys and other games and sports, commercial printing, dog kennels without outdoor runs, drive-through facilities, funeral parlours or mortuaries, gasoline service stations, hotels or motels, resort residential, landscape nurseries, mini storage facilities, motorised vehicle sales, recreation, indoor and outdoor commercial, restaurants, trade service establishments, auto graveyards, junkyards, scrap processing plants, boat hauling and repair, commercial fishing facilities, high-tech industry, industrial plants and assembly, water-related industrial, lumber yards, outdoor storage, and research facilities. And that's all I have.
So they can basically build anything except a house.
Yeah, well, no, there's still some things they can't have that are allowed in commercial, but there's an awful lot they can have.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
But no, certainly thank you for that detail on the extent of
And
what
I
they
have
can
some
build.
handouts with that chart, that spreadsheet, if anybody wanted one of those. I have brought some. Would you like me to?
Yes.
Yeah?
As planning director is getting her handouts, are there any questions for her when she comes back?
Only question I have is, when Dr. Albibi purchased this property, was it already industrial?
I couldn't tell you that. I don't know how long that property. That's not something that I would look at.
Okay. Is there any way we can find out?
I think there's probably representatives here on his behalf.
Okay.
Yes, would Dr. Albibi's representatives come?
We have Bob Hughes here from Barron and Reading, and I believe he's representing. Are you representing the people that are against it, right? The adjoining property
Mr.
owner.
McNeil? Yes.
Hey, good evening. Sean McNeil Carroll Engineering. Okay, thank you. Yes, my understanding it was industrial when he purchased the property, but that doesn't, relieve him of the opportunity to ask for land use change.
I just wanted to make sure so that we didn't change the land use or someone else changed it, because that would be not fair if he purchased it with the intent that it was residential, then someone turned it to industrial. That's all I was making sure.
Okay, I'll be in the audience if y'all have other questions.
While Mr. McNeil is here, are there any additional questions from the commission regarding the property or from Mr. McNeil?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Actually, you know what? I do have one, Sean. Hang on one second. Sorry about that.
It's okay, I left my phone anyway,
So
thank you.
the 13, I think it was 13.4 acres or whatever it may be, or 14 point.
It's 15.41 acres is the request.
Now, is that usable acreage, or is that the entire surface area that we're looking at?
Well, the site plan, if you go back to the site plan, Amanda, please. Yeah, that is showing some wetlands to be filled to put in the infrastructure, mostly crossing there to those lots 14 through 17.
Do we know what would be usable surface area?
That will be
excluding
I'm sorry, that will be the area that's usable, those lots are shown on this property.
Okay. Well, no, I mean, I'm just talking about footage or acres or whatever. Do we know how much acres is actually going to be?
It's roughly
developed?
14.36 acres. It's shown there at the bottom of the page.
Yeah, but that's excluding the wetlands then. That's not including the wetlands. That's what I'm asking.
I'll say no. I think it does include some of the wetlands, yes. Yes.
Property area is
21 acres, okay.
13.
Right.
The conservation is 5.41, which leaves a 15.52.
Okay.
So that's including the wetlands. So when the wetlands are taken out of it, it will be less than that.
And the setback, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank
So
you.
I guess it's maybe about an acre between the wetlands and the setbacks. Then if it's 14,
Yeah,
on the
about
next-
13 acres usable probably. Okay, thank you.
I had one question for Amanda. Is you said the wetlands can't be developed on? Is that true? I thought they could if it was approved by the state. But
They
had
would
to.
have to, in order to develop on the wetlands, they would have to go to the Northwest Florida
Right.
Water Management District and mitigate, get permits and permission and mitigate.
So it's a possibility. We don't know if it would happen.
It would be a possibility with this particular, and we're not again supposed to look at any particular
Mm-hmm.
one. With this particular development, they are. I think you can
No,
see.
I was just talking in general.
You can see the areas that
Mm-hmm.
might be impacted a bit, but they're preserving
Right.
most of the wetlands. I mean, until we see a development order, I wouldn't know how much they got permits for and how much they were leaving.
Like, if you go back to that one map, like for instance, I understand the green area, there's no way, that'll never get touched.
Right.
I get that. I guess the only question I was asking is, it is a possibility they could develop on that if they got approval from the state.
They'd have to get approval from the
Right.
state. Yeah.
Thanks.
All right, additional questions for Amanda? Any comments from our city attorney?
Any questions, I'll answer them.
All right, at this time, we'll open the floor to the public for comments from the public.
Mayor, member of the commission, Mr. Ovos. My name is Bob Hughes. I'm a lawyer with Barron and Redding, 220 Mackenzie Avenue in Panama City. I represent Mr. Cliff Myers and his partners who own what I always call it the Sally Mae building. Matter of fact, I had the pleasure of bringing them here, representing them when we came in. And so Mr. Myers has a number of critical concerns about this proposed land use change. I've been in the real estate development business with representing developers primarily for 30-something years, and one of the things that I've learned is that cities and counties establish zoning districts for a particular purpose, and one of the main purposes that to establish an industrial district is to encourage businesses and industry to locate in that district. And what it does, you get people who go to work there, and they may want to live in the city or the county where they work, or they shop there on the way home or whatever. And that's what Lynn Haven did here, was established an industrial district and as Amanda showed us, all of the various uses that can be made in an industrial district in Lynn Haven, and the great majority of them are not residential. Now, it did say that I got to say this, and Sean may take issue with, he may know something different than I did, but in all my years of being involved in this type of a situation, looking at zoning, I have rarely, if ever, found an industrial district which allowed any kind of residential. But Lynn Haven elected to do that in its wisdom, but it's multifamily, and apparently these people didn't want to do that. And I can guarantee you that if somebody came and wanted to build 20 units an acre of multifamily on this piece of property, the screaming would be loud, louder than it is here. So to take a piece of industrial and try to turn it into residential when there are any number of other pieces of property within the city of Lynn Haven that is growing, and by the way, very impressive, that could be residential, but instead they apparently think that they can turn a lot of money here by doing that. One of the things that is interesting to me is that in the application, it talks about compatibility, and it says adjacent existing uses, and to the west it says Upper Goose Bayou. Well, if I may come around and show you, to the west is a large piece of property that I have scribbled on here, which is immediately to the west of the piece that is being at issue here. And that's not Upper Goose Bayou, that's down here. What that is, it's 450 parking places that go with Mr. Myers' building for the people that work there. I don't know why the application doesn't tell us that. None of the pictures that I saw or the drawings tell us that. That parking lot is immediately adjacent to the, I'll call it the Sally Mae building. I'll tell you what use is being made of it. He leases that building now to Maximus Federal. They have approximately 1,800 people that work in that building every day. When they come out and when they go in, they go on Sally Mae Drive. We have just seen the drawing here, the layout that shows these people who, if this land use change were to be permitted and some residential were to be built there, that would show that's going to dump that traffic right back on Sally Mae Drive. In the application, there is a section on transportation. Amanda and I have worked together long enough to know that most of the traffic issues come up at development order stage. But here, there's a whole section asking questions about the transportation. For instance, roadways serving the site, functional classification, rights of way, current level of service, and it says Sally Mae Drive and Maryland Avenue, the proposed amendment should have a reduced impact to the roadway system. Well, whenever you add residential housing, you don't have a reduced, you add trips. I had an engineer friend of mine look it up, and he confirmed for me that this project, if it was built, would add trips, primarily as we look at there to Sally Mae Drive. Here's a major problem and issue that Mr. Myers has. He and his partners have a one-year lease. It's a recurring lease with these people, and they have sometimes up to 2,000 people that work in that building. I think and I hope that the mayor and council would see this as a tremendous advantage to the city to have that kind of employment within the city limits. In the event that you put more residential that close to the parking lot and to the building where these people work, you take the chance is clear to me that the residential people may get upset with the traffic and the comings and the goings if you can get them to buy something there in the first place, and that would be the first thing to do, to convince them of that. If that complaint series got pushed far enough, it could put into jeopardy the lease. And the last thing that that Cliff and his partners want to have happen is to lose that lease. And I would think that the city fathers and mothers would want to keep that lease if at all possible. I can't tell you that it would happen, but I can tell you that from my own experience in doing situations like this where you put a kind of an inconsistent use with an existing use that's inconsistent with the new use, you end up with people coming up here and spending more than the 3 minutes I guess I have than complaining to the city council. So what I'm here to do is to urge, when it comes time to vote, is to urge the city council to deny the application. These people, there are plenty of places they can go to build residential. And I would hope that the city council would want to keep this industrial and encourage, and maybe there hasn't been anybody showing interest to come there to put a business yet, but that doesn't mean that they won't. City of Lynn Haven we read about it in the paper and see it on the news. Y'all are doing a great job attracting business, attracting new business, and you've got ready-made a place to put them. And I would hope that you would keep that ready-made place. So I'll be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions for Mr. Hughes?
No. I'll comment. First off, I don't think, I'm not a lawyer, but I am a manufacturer, and I don't think an industrial company would touch that piece of property with a 10-foot pole, especially with that easement, that power easement right through the middle of the property. And I think something else we need to remember as well is, we're not just talking about reasons why it's bad, in my opinion. We as a government can't be necessarily dictating what a man does with his own property. I mean, I'm a small government conservative, and it bothers me that if someone that legitimately owns the land can't find anybody to do anything with it, industrial-wise, find somebody that wants to develop it, and then we as the government says, no, sorry, I'm not going to let it happen. That gives me heartburn. I mean, I know you're doing your job, but I'm also doing mine. So that's a couple of points I wanted to actually put out there because it wasn't mentioned earlier about the power easement. We talked about the conservation areas and the wetlands and all that, but not the power easement. So to get a building or a parking lot and all this stuff right there with that line right through the middle of the property on top of the conservation area, I'm just speaking, truth to you as you spoke to us. So I don't see it. I could be wrong. I could be wrong. Wouldn't be the first time. But I wanted to put those 2 points out there, though.
Sorry if I respond to that.
I do too.
So it's, I understand with the land that's left in the industrial park, it's, would I love to see industrial business be developed there? Of course I would. Is there challenges with that? Absolutely. Will something develop there in the future? I don't know. But I think the bigger concern is not so much what you can gain, but what we can lose. Because if we allow residential to develop throughout the whole industrial park, and let's say one of those businesses decide to shut down, and then someone buys it up, puts residential in there, that's a business that you will never, ever get back. And I've said this a million times, industrial manufacturing business, you make the most net revenue for the city.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't want to lose that, and that's my concern.
But I kind of see it, Commissioner, as two birds in a bush versus a bird in the hand. I mean, the fact of somebody maybe developing something in the future is looking at what you could have, whereas right now we've got something that could happen.
But again, you have a great potential of losing a business because of that invading onto the industrial park.
And as far as I know, the rest of that industrial park is industrial.
And let's keep in mind too, don't mistake me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure, if I remember last time we talked about this, Mr. Myers talked about they were actually looking at buying that property because they were looking at expanding at one point. And so there is, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, go ahead.
There is potential there for it to be used.
Yeah, and even if you look at the other two lots up there, the other two businesses, they would not fit on that piece of property.
Well, I think that Mr. Walk makes a point. When Mr. Myers and his partner bought the property, they had the expectation and every right to believe that the industrial would stay industrial, and that their parking lot that sticks into the into that piece that we forgot to put it on the application they had, I think they had the right to have that expectation, and that probably entered into, they spent a considerable amount of money in purchasing that property, developing it, and then keeping it leased for their benefit, of course, but also for the benefit of the city.
Right.
Kevin, with us being a right to develop state, if Mr. Albibi, let's say that the board voted not in his favor, and he pushed the issue and said, hey, look, I own this land, I've owned it for years, and the city's stopping me from doing anything with it.
Yeah, and we're not. Like I said, there's a whole litany of uses he can have in industrial, and at this stage, it's you've got the greatest amount of deference at this stage. It's land use. We're not talking about zoning or development order where you have a quasi-judicial hearing, and,
Sure.
and certainly at that stage, if we denied him something that he thinks he's allowed, we might have issues. But at this stage, it's truly a policy decision of this body. Simply, do we want to leave it industrial, or erode some of that industrial, as long as it's consistent with surrounding areas, which obviously there is single-family residential. So I think, you guys have the tough decision in a couple of weeks, because it's just a policy decision. And you're not going to. I'm not worried about facing any sort of true legal challenges either way, because you do have the greatest amount of deference at this stage in the game, as opposed to if you do make a change and do something different, or if you don't make a change and they try to bring in some sort of different, use that you don't allow. There's more scrutiny on those decisions than there are going to be on the decision you have at the next meeting.
Okay. Two points I want to make real quick is, that's why they asked the question earlier, if when Dr. Albibi purchased the property, was it already industrial? Because if he bought it and it was residential, and in a later line, the commission back then decided to change the land use, then that would be a different conversation. So if he bought it when it was industrial, he knew what he was buying into. The second part is, I understand that, there's a balance between residential households and businesses. And as we know, we're running out of land in Lynn Haven, and we want to try to bring in as many businesses as possible. If you have too many businesses, not enough residential households, then you're out of balance. I think we need more businesses as opposed to residential. That's my opinion.
Well, and that's not an argument of mine, because I mean, trust me, I'm all about business. I love business. I eat it every day. So I'm all for that. It's just, again, at the point, I'm not going to lay out my points again. Y'all know them, but it's just how I feel strongly about it. I do. Stopping a man from doing something with his land bothers me. If I was in his shoes, I would be upset.
Yeah, but we're not really doing that. That's why I asked, again, that's why I asked the question earlier, did he buy it? When he bought the land, was it already industrial? Because if he bought the land and it was residential and we did something to change that,
Sure.
then I would absolutely agree with you that we can't force them to do something with, you know,
Yeah,
they
but
already.
we do land use changes all the time. I mean, all the time.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin, but we don't change the land use of the property unless someone asks us to change it.
Right.
So we wouldn't do that. You know, somebody could try something
Yeah.
residential and then we would change
Yeah,
it.
I mean, you'd have to notify them and send out hearings and stuff, but
Right.
you're right, we in practice never do that.
And I figured that. It's just, that's why I asked the question, because if the commission or someone else changed it on that person, then that would be unfair for the person knowing that they bought the land, knowing it was residential, and they kind of totally changed the land use code change on them. And I don't think that's what happened.
Commissioner Tender?
I just wanted to say that I agree with Mr. Hughes on the fact, I really hadn't given it a lot of thought, of that parking lot. I don't know who would buy a home backed up to that parking lot that's on what I call the Sally Mae property too. And I think we would be asking for an enormous amount of complaints with residents coming to us and saying, so-and-so's, you know, they're after me, they called the police because I parked my boat in their parking lot or whatever. I just can't, that to me, they just don't mix, you know, so I think that could be a real situation. I also, and I know we are probably not supposed to talk about this, but I also think if we change this, we are opening a door that's going to, in the future, cause us a problem, because if we do choose to change the land use on this, then we have set a precedence that whoever comes and wants to purchase all the rest of that, like Marina Island, how can we say no? How can we say no once we've said yes to one person? And how do we know that's not Marina Island going to build this development? We don't know who it is.
And why would we say no? I mean, I don't really understand that. We would never say no to any development, I wouldn't think, as long as, if there was a manufacturer banging on the doors to go in there, I'd be the first one to say, hey, let's cut the
Then why do
roof.
we even have land use code changes? Why don't we just let everyone build wherever they want to build? I mean,
Well-
seriously, that's what government is about. I don't understand why you don't get that.
Well, why don't we change land use stuff all the time. I mean,
Yeah,
all
but
the
you're
time.
saying, why, don't stop someone from developing.
But no
Then
one-
just don't even, let's not even have land use code changes,
Well,
land use
the
code.
land's just gonna sit there vacant. I'm saying, let's let the man do what he wants with his property. It's just sitting there. It's sitting there. And what you're saying is someone might come sometime in the future. Yep, that's pretty vague, but you're absolutely right. Sometime in the future, someone may come, but we can't say that for sure. It could be
Well,
87 years.
I'll give you a perfect example. We voted on that one piece of property behind Po Folks there. You guys remember that? And I think two of them were low density residential, correct me if I'm wrong, and then there was one that was they wanted to change it to commercial or something like that.
It wasn't consistent with the adjacent properties. This
Right.
was consistent with the adjacent properties. That's
Is it? How is it consistent?
There's houses all around it.
For the same land use as
Two
what's
sides.
right here.
But it's the integrity of an industrial park, like you had mentioned, Commissioner. And that sticks in my mind too. And if I could ask Mayor and City Manager, you guys were privileged to have the Economic Development Alliance Director, Becca Harden and Carol Roberts in a meeting about what and I don't see them here today, so I would hopefully like to know from both of you what transpired in that meeting.
So we did have a meeting with Becca Hart and Carol Roberts and the tenants from the industrial park to discuss potential ideas of what type of industry could be brought into that area. And so we did charge Becca Harding with going to try to see what type of industry could be brought into that 15-acre parcel, and then also asked that they would have a follow-up meeting with the tenants and with Dr. El Bibi. From my, city managers also followed up with Carol Roberts as well. From the communication that I received from Carol Roberts, it sort of came to a stalemate where Dr. El Bibi in their estimation, wanted too much for the property. It's because we did talk about them purchasing the property, you know, hey, or suggested, I'm not gonna say we talked about it, suggested, one thing you can do is offer to purchase the property from him, and then you can keep it as industrial. You know, just don't say, hey, just vote no, and don't provide any options for Dr. LBB, which is what I stated to the tenants was, we can vote no, but what type of options are we offering Dr. LBB at the same time? And so have that conversation to try to offer some options as to what it could be. And offer to pay his property taxes or something. I don't know what those options are. And then that's when we allowed them to meet, so that we as a city wouldn't be intermingling in any type of thing. But from what I received from Carol Roberts, was that it sort of came to a stalemate. That there was really no conclusion as to how they could move forward together or how they could resolve the issue outside of us.
What was the
without
entity
voting
that
on it.
would have considered purchasing from, who was the entity that was considering purchasing from Dr. LB?
I think the initial entity was the Cliff Myers Group was the initial entity that had considered purchasing, but from my understanding, and Mr. Myers, correct me if I'm wrong, it was too much at the time, or it was overvalued for the purchase price. But then I just encouraged any of the tenants to look at trying to purchase the property again.
And any other industrial tenants?
Right, you know, just, you know, however y'all decide to purchase it as a group or as an individual, and then you could sort of ensure that it stays industrial. Then if it's your property, then.
Or a co-op of the other tenants?
City Manager, do you have anything to add to that?
No, that was
Is there
basically
anything else I can help
everything
you
that
all
was
with?
talked about.
Mr. Myers might have a couple of comments if it's all right with you.
Yeah.
Sure.
I appreciate the time being able to be before you today. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, Mr. Myers, Mr. Myers, one moment before you come up. If we could get Mr. McNeil to come back up for one moment, have a question for him or Dr. LB, whoever would like to answer that. Has there been any inquiry or research as to how this property could be developed as industrial, or is it just been the thought to change the land use to low density residential? So for example, Ms. Amanda listed 25 to 50 different ideas that this property could be used for as an industrial property as it is. So when we talk about, as Commissioner Moore mentioned, when the property was initially purchased as industrial, what ideas were maybe in mind or vision in mind when purchasing this property as industrial? And have there been any investigation or inquiry as to how it could be developed as industrial?
Point blank, no, as far as regarding the property owners or, you know, apparently they have not had any, you know, true industrial purchasers or come in to do industry. They're not industrials themselves. So but I do want to clarify a couple of things that Mr. Hughes spoke, and that is the property, you know, on the application it says what's north, west, south, east, and, you know, obviously mostly the west, in my opinion, is Goose Bayou. So there was no idea here trying to, you know, try to hoodwink anyone in this application. I hope y'all understand that. With regard to the traffic, it's a comparative analysis. 19 lots has a lot less traffic than most all that list you show as a allowable use. So it would be a less impact. Obviously, when you develop a vacant piece of property, you add traffic. But the question is, what would you add traffic if you put, you know, one of those other uses on there? So it is an appropriate application.
It is interesting. I didn't know that, because speaking of the traffic, if they did duplexes, for example, which is allowable, correct? If they wanted to build a bunch of duplexes, that would increase traffic a good bit too.
There would be more, yes. Yes. Single-family homes around 9, townhomes are around 8 vehicles per day, roughly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Tender?
I was just going to say that I think with 1,800 or however many employees that Sally Mae, I can never remember the name of that, Maximus or whatever it is, that they have, I'm surprised somebody doesn't want to build industrial on this industrial piece of property. Everybody eats lunch every day. They have 2 shifts out there. I mean, there's a lot of
You could
potential.
expand. This is expansion.
Yeah, expansion,
There
yes.
you go. You
yes.
could, Victoria Bites number 2.
Victoria's,
right?
yeah.
Victoria's Last Bite number 2, right there.
There you go, there you go. But I would think that there would be, you know, a lot of potential out in that area. And by the way, Victoria's has gone out there and sold dinner when they had the second shift. We did that for a number of months.
You make a lot of chicken salad out there.
Yes. Go ahead, sir, I'm sorry.
Cliff
Mr. Myers.
Myers, owner of the Maximus Federal Building and adjacent property. And I do appreciate what Bob said, and don't really have a whole lot to add to that, other than it's not your job to figure out options for Albibi, because there was read about 25 or 50 options that he could have. He just wants the one he can't have unless you vote. And just a point of reminder that I would really respect, even though I've been on the other side too about developing, and I respect what you say, I just don't want this board to lose sight of the fact that when we bought that property, it was vacant. It was not producing anything. The previous owner had failed in a request to change the zoning for it before the commission, and thank the good Lord that board had the foresight to say no, because there's 1,800 people out there. And I'm gonna tell you, when we bought that building, it was in disrepair. There was no tenant possible. I just happened to see on a piece of paper that at the time, General Dynamics had looked at that building to rent it. On my own accord, scared to death, I flew to Washington, D.C. I met with General Dynamics. They said, no way, we're not coming to Panama City. That building is in disrepair, and we're not interested. And I said, well, hold on, we're gonna fix it up. And we spent, at the time, over $3 million, hard-earned money, to fix that building. They put us on a tentative site, meaning we'll come look at it. And in a confidentiality agreement and a real hush-hush time, they came, they visited, and they said, I tell you what, we'll give you a 6-month contract. And I remember telling them, we're gonna service you, because the other side of that is another business entity that I own. We do the maintenance side of that building. And there's serious money spent in the community that trickles down through that. And at the time they signed the lease, I said, we're gonna service you in such a way that we'll not give you a chance to leave. And the gracious mayor, when the hurricane came and the roof was blown off, we had 2 weeks, and y'all remember what that was like. And if I seem a little emotional, it's because of what the stress that has gotten it to be here. In 2 weeks after the hurricane, we put a roof on that building, got all the employees back in it. They were up and running, and the city manager met with me at my office, which I am so grateful for, about getting rides for employees. And we were successful in doing that. And so there's a lot of people that are employed there, and that is a yearly renewable contract. And look, they can leave just like that. So they have just renewed for 1 year. So I would like you to look at the overhead. Go back to that view. Take a good look at that parking lot that we own, that is out there, and just imagine being next to that with a house and trying to say that those jive. They just absolutely don't. And so there's probably another tenant here that might want to speak, but I appreciate it. I never dreamed that this would be my 3rd or 4th time. I'm a behind-the-scenes guy. I detest this, but I'm just trying to look out for those people. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Can I,
Yeah.
Johnny Bashir's, 811 Louisiana Avenue. I just had a couple of comments. First, nobody's mentioned the cell tower that's in that little corner, right. This right, there's a cell tower that sits on that little corner right there. I'm just mentioning that because I've not heard anybody mention it. The second thing is Dr. Al-Bibi and his wife purchased that property in two different parcels. They purchased an upper parcel and a lower parcel. The upper part was purchased in 2004 from Panama City Bay County Airport and Industrial District. The lower part down here was purchased in 1994 from North Harbor Development Project Incorporated. That's out of public records. I'm just trying to give you a little background on that. Then, just as a point of reference, the Sally Mae property here in their parking lot originally was purchased by Sally Mae in 1991 from the Panama City Bay County Airport and Industrial Project. That's just to give you a little dates. Now that I've given you the information, I do have an opinion, as you could imagine. Generally, I think that as a city or as a municipality, we should maintain our land use designations unless there's a very clear-cut and valid reason to change them. If we change the comprehensive plan, or we do have a comprehensive plan, but if we allow frequent changes for reasons that are not well-founded, I'm kind of agreeing with Commissioner Ward. We don't really have a plan. If we change it for no really strong reason, we don't have a plan. We've got a guide, but if we're not following the plan, we don't really have a plan. And that's just my general opinion. Thank you.
Commissioner Ward.
I was just going to respond what Mr. Myers was saying. I don't know if you guys went out and visited all those businesses out there, and then the other industrial park where Train and Jensen's at. And if you haven't, I really highly recommend that you do, because it'll open your eyes to what's going on over there. I do remember when I went to Maximus and I had a tour of the facility, they did bring up about the whole thing with the hurricane, and how imperative it was for them to get it back up. Otherwise, they were going to lose it, and how the city actually helped them out. I think it was with water. They had to make sure that it was livable, not livable, but workable and all that. And it was a big, huge deal. And a lot of people counted on that so they could bring income for jobs and things like that. So, like I said, if you haven't gone out there and visited them and got a tour of it, I highly recommend that you do it. It was eye-opening to me. So, I was going to say.
All right. Thank you. Additional comments from the commission?
I just wanted to ask, is Mr. Pope here by any chance? Mr. Pope, or Polo?
No.
Well, I haven't seen him.
He's not here. Okay.
Yes.
Well, good evening, everybody. I was here last meeting, and I'm saying that I bought this property again in 1994, which is like 30 years. And the reason I bought it is because I looked around and I see houses across the bayou, behind me on the side, and it's all houses. Now, on top of all this, Maryland, there used to be like 10 empty lots, and they were all low. And people put dirt, overfill it, and build houses on that. And I was surprised that nobody really objected to any of that. They approved houses, and people are living in it. And you know, I'm not trying to change the industrial park. I mean, this industrial park, you see, it's a wide area, and you know, anybody in the industrial park, if they're interested and they pay fair share, fair money, I'm glad to sell it. I'm not willing to just, leave it or somebody give me like pennies on the dollar. So I think last time I was here, somebody mentioned that they gave me an offer, but it was not really a reasonable offer. So that's why I did not even bother with that. So, again, there are many, many houses around, and that's why I bought the property, thinking that develop it. Now, as far as the city concerned, this property could produce taxes from 18 residents. Right now, it's not paying a penny or very little. So I think it would be good for the city to change it into housing, and that would be more income to the city. So, you know, again, I think everyone has pros and cons, but I mean, I was not stupid that I bought this property in 1994, because I look across the bayou and look how many houses. There are $1 million houses. So, you know, I thought with some waterfront in there, you know, it would be nice to develop it. And I think, again, a little subdivision will be a lot more beneficial to the city than an empty land. And again, I want to just say for Bob, I don't know if you remember, I was one of your clients. Yeah. So I don't know, I wish I hired you, so you will not object that.
Thank you, Dr. El-Bibi. Additional comments from the public? Any additional public commentary? Any final statements from the commission?
Yeah, I have some.
Now, does this mean we're going to make the meeting shorter at the commission meeting?
So, just something I want you to think about is a couple things. One, you guys remember in the last election, there was an option to vote for the tax abatement for businesses. And that tax abatement wasn't just for any businesses. It was only for industrial manufacturing businesses. And why did they do that? Was because there's so much meat on the bone when it comes to industrial manufacturing businesses. And those businesses know that. So when they go around looking for businesses, they're trying to see, you know, who can sweeten the deal the most. And whoever sweetens the deal the most usually ends up winning their business. So I would think about that, because again, if we lose some of those businesses in there and it all becomes residential, you're out a lot of money. And so this is the way I look at residential also. Something else to think about is, remember I talked about for every dollar of tax revenue we get, we provide approximately about $1.40 of city services. It's a net loss. And that's why you have to have property taxes. That's why you have to pay for your water, your sewer, your sanitation, because we're not a profit business. We're there to provide a service. But when you look at industrial manufacturing businesses, we're not providing a whole lot of city services. And so we make quite a bit of money on it, and we cannot screw that up. If we screw that up, we'll never ever get it back. So just something I want you to think about.
It just occurred to me, and I don't even know what made me think about it, but as I look at this red line around this huge piece of property, that new assessment thing that we passed a few months back, I bet that piece of property, I bet they pay huge assessment fees for that.
Double.
He did.
Yeah, he's coming to talk to us about the stormwater assessment
Yeah.
as well.
As well as Dr. Abibi's property, that
Yes.
whole big piece of property.
Yes.
He's probably paying thousands on that.
Any final statements from the commission? Commissioner Aldridge, Commissioner Perno? Any final comments from the public? All right. Thank you all for your... yes, sir.
Thank you, everybody, for having me. This is Osama Al-Bibi, Dr. Al-Bibi's son. I appreciate everybody looking at the pros and cons of this. Obviously, we want to do what's best, not only for us. I know Mr. Myers is looking out for his interests and his employees, and I commend him on that. We're willing, if there is an industrial buyer. We don't want to change it if it doesn't need to be changed. But like my dad said, we've been sitting on it for almost 30 years. Mm-hmm. It's producing nothing. So if there is an industrial buyer that'll pay fair market price, and I think I was at the Bay Chamber when we had the meeting. You know, I think they were saying somewhere in the 150 to 175,000 is the kind of the market price per acre. We're willing, if there is a buyer, if there's an industrial buyer ready to come in to this industrial park, by all means. But if not, you probably are aware, there's a big shortage in residential houses, not just, you know, in Lynn Haven, but all across Bay County, all across almost the country. We're at record low inventories, right? So I know we mentioned there's about 1,800 employees. Maybe some of them, you know, they'll be working right, you know, living right next to their work. So just keep that in mind, you know, like, again, we're willing to do whatever to make it work for everybody. But at the end of the day, you know, just like Brandon said, like, we don't want to impose our will. Like, you know, if a man wants to do something, again, it's something reasonable. See, if we look at the lines, I mean, there's residential on 2/3 of it, so it's not like we're building in the middle of a factory, right? So I just wanted to make you know, you guys are all aware of it, so you guys will make the best decision. Thank you again. Thank you.
Thanks. Yes, sir.
Brian Gray, 1513 East Ninth Street. As was mentioned before, when this property was purchased 30 years ago or so, it was with the expectation of it's in an industrial zone. When I bought my property on Ninth Street, it was in a residential area. So, you know, there's a lot of things to consider. Of course, the employees, the potential for future development, and the new development that's coming up may come around, and all of a sudden, as they said, somebody said before, the industry may say, oh, that's too much for us, we're not going to renew our lease. So we just need to think about the big picture instead of $1 now versus $1.50 later. I mean, you know, why rush? It's been 30 years, but somebody may have passed just because we're doing all this. I don't know, but just we should leave our options open as a city. Thank you.
Thank you. Any final statements? All right. Thank you all for coming out tonight. This will be on our next agenda, I believe. And
April 12th is our first one.
okay, this will be on our April 12th commission meeting agenda. Meeting adjourned.